You're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword.
We're back.
Did you miss us?
We took a week off for personal reasons, and I think we should just get this out on the open.
Yeah.
We're taking 2 weeks off after this episode.
Oh my
So
God.
prepare now. It's just, we both have weddings, and it's the damn weddings.
These damn... Who is getting married in this economy?
In a panini?
In a panini, I swear to God. This panini press has been unforgiving and people are still getting married. Y'all are wildin'. Yes, no, personal reasons for not being here last week. Personally, I have reasons that I'm not going to tell you.
Personally, I didn't want to, so...
Personally, I hate all of you with love. Of course, I love you all.
Love.
And that's why we're taking 2 more weeks off, because we can't stand it here anymore. We just can't do it anymore.
To be fair, October is our holiday season, so
It's true.
We can take some time off. We're allowed to, but we are sorry. Just prepare yourself now for 2 weeks of total silence. You can go back, listen to an old episode.
It's true. That's a great idea. If you haven't listened to our 100th episode spectacular and you want something that's literally insane, that's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you want something a little bit heavier, listen to Grace's Dolphin episode.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a classic, if you will.
How you're going to find it, I don't know, because we don't label anything. But you know what you can do? You can look on our Instagram. We post pictures there of what the actual episodes are about. So go through the Instagram. If anything,
Do your own research for once in your life.
strikes you, go check it out. We're at the Good Evening Girls on there, and it'll be linked in the description. But speaking of which, we are the Good Evening Girls, and this is Two Girls, One Crossword. I'm Grace Topinka.
And I'm Chelsea Rowan. This is your favorite weekly pod word crosscast, though we will be taking a couple weeklies off. Like we just
now
said.
It's a month. This is a monthly. No, well, whatever. We're not going to get into it, but
We're allowed to take time off. We don't get paid for this. This is fun. We have fun while doing this, and we're allowed to take breaks once in a while.
thank you. But
Like anybody's arguing with us.
people are like, okay, we don't care.
We got the message. Let's get into it.
It's like, you're just background music while I wash dishes, which is fine.
So we're here
we
for.
should talk about Polapalooza.
Yes,
Sorry,
we had a poll.
yes, Polapalooza from 2 weeks ago, our last
Ages ago.
episode.
Mhm.
Chelsea did a topic on Michelin stars. So we asked, what's the highest Michelin starred restaurant you've eaten at? You could say never been to 1 star, 2 star, 3 stars, and 0% chose 3 stars. So
I'm not surprised.
yeah, I mean, that's fine. I don't think I've ever been to 1. If I have, it's been completely unbeknownst to me. So 63% also said they had never been to 1. That was the number 1 answer.
Okay.
25% have been to 1 star, and then 13% have been to 2 stars.
Ooh. I've only ever eaten at a 1-star Michelin restaurant.
You got to work your way up.
You got it. And also, it's like the price point jumps significantly for each star. I
Yeah.
think I know one person personally that has eaten at a 3-star restaurant.
It's a lot of money for 1 meal.
It is. And
I
there are
forget what
people
stuff
that-
tastes like immediately. So, it's not even like a lasting experience for me.
I know. And you're supposed to not just be paying for the food, but you're also paying for the experience. Like at Alinea in Chicago, for example, they have a whole theme every time you go. And it's just really interesting. Everything comes out and you eat off the table, or you've got things floating above your head.
And your hands are tied behind your back.
And they're slapping you with, reeds and stuff. It's kind of like this whole religious thing. No.
Throw in Cirque du Soleil performers, and then you're talking.
Now we're cooking with oil. So no judgment out there if you've never been to a Michelin restaurant. If you have been to one, you probably
I hope
would
you enjoy
know.
being rich.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy being wealthy. And the only way that I was ever able to go is I went for a lunch at a 1-star, and my dad paid. So shout out to my dad.
Shout out to your dad.
But I didn't even get dinner service, so what's that?
Just a 1-star lunch. It's embarrassing.
I'm obviously very poor. Well, that's it, and that's all for Polapalooza, I guess.
Do we have corrections corners? Anything?
We do
updates?
have a corrections corner.
Oh, yes, I
Okay.
remember this.
Yes. Okay. So we're going back to, I think, the same week we talked about Michelin stars. Let me open up my Twitter real quick here. So in episode 106, I talked about an answer that was about Bush's, slogan, no new taxes, and how he lost the election to Clinton because he had said no new taxes during the campaign, and then there actually were taxes and whatever. Basically, I don't know anything about politics before I was born. I just know, general information, the fact that Bush was in fact a president before Clinton was. Anyway, so then we had someone write to us on Twitter, and they let us know that Bush said no new taxes at RNC in 88, but he won the 88 election. And I had said he lost the election. He actually won that election. It was against Dukakis. It was in 92 that he lost to Clinton, which makes sense because he won the election in 88 saying no new taxes, but during that term, the taxes actually rose. So then by the time the next election came with Clinton, people were like, you pissed me off, you lied, et cetera, et cetera. But apparently this person on Twitter is saying that one of the main reasons he lost to Clinton, not only was it this new taxes thing, but a man named Ross Perot, who ran as an independent, ran basically to piss Bush off and to take votes away from him. And that was like another main reason that he lost to Clinton. I don't know if any of this, I didn't actually fact check this. I just trust our listeners.
We believe whatever you tell us. So
you could literally tell me anything and I would believe you. So thank you for writing on Twitter. We love when our listeners write to us. We love I actually like having corrections corners because it's so rare these days. So it's nice. It's like we're adding a little bit of spice to the podcast.
We need to be humbled.
We do. And I don't know anything about politics before 92 because that is the year I was born. So deal with it. Suck it.
This is why I don't talk about presidents.
It's true. Except Benjamin Franklin, who wasn't a president, but he might as well have been.
He's a president in our hearts.
Benny really shakes things up for us.
He invented the library, so... I mean, he didn't really, but he did help start it.
He did. Anyway, that's what I got for corrections corners.
Thanks. Mm-hmm. Shall we venture on over to Heights and Shites?
Let's take a lift over to Heights and Shites. Shall I, what?
Well, I was just saying, I feel like I didn't have like one, whatever. I have like one height from multiple puzzles, that type of vibe this week.
Okay, I'll get us started off then.
Okay.
I liked the Friday, October 8th New York Times by Jakob Jonas. The opener and closers were really good. I love when constructors do this, one across epiphanies, and the answer was aha moments. And then the closer was 57 across epiphanies, eye-openers. So I just like when you kind of have these two clues, they're similar and they bookend the whole puzzle, but they're two unique answers. I really liked that. 35 across, obtain a sum via special relativity, ? And the answer was inherit.
Oh,
being a relative.
Yeah. Smart.
36 across was some like it dirty. And the answer was martini.
Nice.
Yep. And then 38 across, one who objects to screw caps, say. And the answer was wine snob.
Oh.
So, I mean, I love a good wine as much as the next person, but I will also drink not good wine.
Yeah. I remember one time going to like a fancy restaurant and they did that thing where you have to test the wine, like take a sip and decide. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. I don't
No, I know.
I'm so uncultured.
It's
like,
okay.
I'm just not a fancy person.
Most people actually have no idea. Like when the sommelier, like even if it's just the waiter, like I went to a pizza restaurant. It was like a nice Italian pizza restaurant and they come over with the rosé and I'm like, it's fucking rosé. Just give me the bottle.
Just pour it down my gullet. I don't care.
I'm like, yes, this is so refined. Like, no, I don't know.
The legs. That's all I know. Don't know what it means, but I know it has legs. I mean, I know what legs means, but.
Will we one day cover wine on this podcast? It comes up a lot in crosswords. So maybe one day one of us will cover sommeliers or wine. It seems like a big one.
I kind of did a little bit in champagne when I did champagne.
It's true. All right, let me finish this this puzzle, 40 across. I liked Cry Heard at a Shoe Auction? Question mark.
Ouch. I don't know.
Sold, but spelled SOLED.
I was like, what? I didn't know shoe auction was a real thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it is, but I just love this clue and this answer.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to end with, from this puzzle, 30 down, eponym for Italian ice chain. The answer was Rita.
Oh, yes, I know Rita. I've had her ices.
Yes. And so I was reading the Rex Parker blog, and he had never heard of this, which I thought was interesting because I believe Rex Parker is from Pennsylvania or New York or something. And I'm from New Jersey, and, we have Rita's in New Jersey, where I'm from. And in where I'm from, we call it Rita's water ice. But everywhere else on the East Coast calls it Rita's Italian ice. So when I went away to college...
That ain't Italian ice, that's just water ice.
Yeah, when I went to college on the first day of spring, I was like, let's go to Rita's water ice and get a free water ice. And people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I never thought about that as like being a strange thing to call that product. Because water ice is just...
Water ice is a little redundant.
Redundant, exactly. But I do want to say that I think water ice from Rita's tastes different than what my idea of Italian ice is. I feel like Italian ice is like a little more solid, whereas like Rita's is like more scoopable.
Well, I don't even know if we had like a Rita store. I would just buy it from the grocery store, like little cups.
Oh, yeah. No, we had like the actual stands, and you could get custard there. I really loved they did these like custard things where you would get like peach or mango water ice with vanilla custard. It was like a smoothie.
Custard and ice? I can't even imagine.
Well, it's soft serve.
With ice? Like an ice? Well, I mean,
it's like
you try it.
It's like a smoothie,
Yeah. Yeah.
She hates it, obviously. Anyway.
It just sounds really cold. I'm not sure how you eat it. Do you drink it through a straw or you eat it with like a straw? Well, all right. I'm willing to try anything once.
That's what I got from that puzzle. Why don't you tell us what you got?
Well, speaking of New Jersey, the Sunday, October 10th Washington Post puzzle by Evan Bernholz. I thought you would like this. 41 across. Convenience store that Mayor of Easttown star Kate Winslet said, quote, almost felt like a mythical place.
Wawa.
Yeah, I don't know why she said that, but...
well, I think Wawa gets talked up so much to, like, outsiders, so that by the time you get there, it's like this mythical creature of, like, what am I going to get when I walk in there? And I talked it up so much when, like, I took Matt there for the first time. He was like, this is like a glorified 7-Eleven. But he is a convert. They've got great sandwiches, great breakfast, great coffee, and everything in between. You can get your milk there, your ice there, your newspaper, your cigarettes. You got it all.
You
can get your gas there.
I can't wait to do a New Jersey trip where I can get water ice and Wawa subs.
Next time you're in Florida, drive to Disney, because Disney is the only place outside of like the tri-state area that has Wawas.
All right, I'll just drive up to Disney really quick.
Yeah, simple.
3.5 hours. Fine.
That's it.
I liked the theme of this puzzle too. The revealer was 78 down. Development on one's head and a hint to this puzzle's theme. So
acne?
Hair growth.
Oh.
So all the themed answers, for example, 3 down. Expert at thrill-seeking jumps is bungee whiz. So if you take off bun, that's a hairstyle. And then gee whiz is like another phrase. So another example would be 58 down, icy aces, frozen masters, or fro, and then zen masters. 70 down, charges for hiring Scooby-Doo's buddy, shaggy rates, shag, or gyrates.
Nice.
Anyways, very smart. He had a bunch of those.
He
did it again. I also liked, this is not from the theme, but 11 down, portmanteau for a famous woman who has come out of the closet. Celesbian.
I don't know if I've ever heard that.
You've never heard? Well, I didn't know I just know it's like a lesbian celebrity, like Haley Kiyoko is a lesbian.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like right after they come out of the closet. I don't know.
Right.
I
I don't think I've ever heard that, which is interesting.
Wow. Well, I've heard it. I don't know what to tell you.
So it must be real. It must be true.
I've heard it. It's true.
It's true. Speaking of themes that we liked, I liked the theme from the Sunday, October 10th New York Times by Brandon Copey. The puzzle was titled Clue, the movie. It didn't have anything to do with actual Clue, the movie, but I was excited when I saw that. Basically, the clues are movie titles, and the answers are literal responses to the movie titles, essentially. Or like relatively literally, right? So, for example, 26 across, guys and dolls. And the answer was G.I. Joes.
Okay.
Okay. Or what about 38 across, Star Trek? And the answer was the red carpet, because stars trek down the red carpet.
Oh, smart. Okay.
What about 67 across, The Imitation Game? Simon Says.
Oh, I was going to say that.
She was going to say it. Or 113 across, Wayne's World. Gotham, Bruce Wayne.
Nice.
So,
I got it.
Just things like that. I thought that was fun. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
What else you got?
Well, I'm just going to have my one-offs. So let's see. Monday, New York Times, October 11th by Ben Paul. 20 across, what may have the solution to your vision problems? Question mark. Eye drop.
Yes. It was good.
I also like 9 across, social influence, clout. I know like clout is already a thing, but I feel like it's had a resurgence among young people. You know, if you're like social insta famous, you have clout.
Yes.
The Tuesday, October 12th by Connor Sefcow, 17 across, game that has only a single round. Russian roulette.
Yes, and I think that works two ways, you know, because it only has one round in the gun, but it could also only have one round total.
Yeah.
If you get the bullet,
if you play
over.
it right, you only play once. October 13th by Brian McManus. Which one was that? 67 across. Like it or loathe it, bread piece.
Nice.
The answer is end. Do you like or loathe the end?
I like it. Well, okay, it depends on the type of bread. If we're talking just like a plain loaf of white bread or like a loaf of bread cut that you buy like in the plastic sleeve at the store, I will eat it. But in my heart of hearts, no. If it's like a crusty like piece of like bread that you buy from like a bakery or like one that you like, it's like a nice loaf of sourdough, I will eat every part of that bread and savor it with all of the love in my heart.
Use every part of the animal. I agree with that. I do think sometimes the butts are good, but yeah, it has to be like a good quality loaf of bread.
Exactly. I love dipping a big butt of bread into like soup or something, you know?
Let's get Panera.
We should. There's a Panera near me. We should go.
The
I'll come
last
pick you up.
one I liked was the October 14th by Matt Fuchs, Fuchs. Please tell me how you pronounce your last name. Is it the fun way? Is it fucks, perhaps?
Are you fun or are you not fun?
33 across, run for fun, perhaps? Typo.
Oh, okay. We did this puzzle today, I think, and I don't think I've finished solving it because I don't think I got that answer. That's great.
Tricked me a little bit. 39 down, business that offers body waxing. That one got me for a little bit. Car wash.
Oh, yes. I remember this clue, but I didn't finish the puzzle. Very good.
63 down, is after you, question mark. And it's are. Like, is after you. You is, you are. Anyways, that's it. That's all I got.
Very nice. Okay. We're going to take it back to some of the puzzles like Grace has already talked about. The Monday, October 11th by Ben Paul, New York Times. I just wanted to shout these two clues and answers out specifically. Just a little talking point, 25 down. Like something that's polarizing. And the answer was love it or hate it. And then the next clue directly after was 32 across. Or sorry. I think 25 across was the like something that's polarizing, love it or hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next clue after that was 32 across. Licorice-like flavoring. And the answer was anise or anise. And I think that was very thematic because it's like something that is extremely polarizing is anything licorice flavored, especially star anise. I hate anything in like the licorice fennel family, star anise included.
All right.
Black licorice,
loud and clear.
You can leave it. I think
In Scandinavia, black licorice, that's like this is what I found when I was in Sweden and I was like at the airport at the candy. It was all black licorice. And salted black licorice is actually good, but they love black licorice up there.
I'm sorry. I basically am never going to visit Sweden then because Grace just sold.
Well, you can eat other things besides the candy.
The only reason I go to travel anywhere is because of the candy, and you know that.
I know that.
Okay, and then I'm going to go to the Tuesday, October 12th New York Times by Connor Sefkow. Grace already talked about 17 across, but it was part of the theme, which I really liked. The theme was 37 across, the revealer, portmanteau, coinage, describing this puzzle's theme. And the answer was alliteration instead of alliteration.
Oh, I got that at the end when I'd like already solved the whole puzzle, so I didn't go back to look and see, but I was like, what's alliteration? Now I understand.
And so 17 across, game that's played with only a single round. The answer is Russian roulette with the alliteration there, and Russia being the nation. 23 across, single item seemingly always found at the bottom of a McDonald's bag, and the answer was French fry. Love that. It's a great clue. 49 across, entrance divided in half horizontally. That's a Dutch door. And 58 across, board game played on a big hexagram, and the answer was Chinese checkers. Matt and I actually filled in Settlers of Catan first, and it fit perfectly. And it was funny because Matt and I had been talking about Settlers of Catan as we started doing the puzzle. And then we got to that, and we were like, holy crap, we were just talking about Settlers of Catan, and it wasn't right, but whatever. Two other clues that I liked from this puzzle, 12 down. Professional you might need to see, ? And the answer was optician. Similar to another one that you liked earlier. And then 35 down, just interesting fun facts. I like to see this kind of stuff in the New York Times, and I also think it's kind of meta for people like Grace and I and other crossword solvers. Most common answer in New York Times crosswords, more than 6% of all puzzles. That's insane. And the answer was era, E-R-A. And that comes up as like an era, like the Victorian era, or an ERA, earned run average, whatever. It has many different usages, and it's just got some good letter pairings. So you love to see it literally in the crosswords.
You love to see it. You can't help but see it.
You can't help but see it. You got to see it with an optician.
And she brought it back around, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm a true legend. That's all I got.
Alrighty. Well, shall we flip the coin?
Is it time?
Jump on in.
I'm really curious to see what we're talking about this week. I had a hard time picking a topic. I had a bunch of different things that I wanted to do, and I ended up with this topic for a specific reason. But it wasn't necessarily the topic I wanted to do.
All right. I feel like you could potentially have done my topic, but
about to
can't say for sure.
Find out, folks. You have to keep listening to know.
Anticipation is just...
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Flipping the coin now. It's heads.
That's you. All right, let's see.
My topic comes from the Sunday, October 10th New York Times by Brendan Copey. 112 down. Legacy of horror films.
No,
the
I didn't
answer
do this
is
topic.
Bella. So I'm talking about Bella Lugosi today.
Okay, I don't know who that is.
Grace.
I know. At least I don't think I know who it is. I might
know who this is, but you probably don't know them by name, which is shocking to me. Shocking. I'm not going to say this, but I'm going to say it. I might know more about early horror films than you.
You might. I don't know that much about early horror films.
Like the classic, like, creature films, you know?
Yeah, other than Godzilla.
I don't know anything about Godzilla except what I learned in the podcast. Anyway, we're going to talk about Bela Lugosi today. And the reason I chose
is she from Creature from the Black Lagoon?
No.
Oh.
It is a man.
Oh.
The reason I'm talking about Bela Lugosi is because it's Halloween and his birthday is October 20th. So by the time this is out, it'll be 2 days and then we can celebrate Bella's birthday.
It's my niece's birthday too, so we'll throw him a joint birthday party.
A joint B-day. Okay. Getting settled in here. So Bela Lugosi is a Hungarian-born actor, or he was, I should say, a Hungarian-born actor who is most famous for his portrayal of the vampire Count Dracula.
Oh, did you talk about him in your vampire episode?
I might have talked about him in my vampire episode. There are tons and tons of Dracula films out there, vampire films. He played Dracula in the famous 1931, like, black and white Dracula. So he is like the Dracula. It's not Nosferatu. It's Dracula. Okay.
We get them confused here on this podcast.
We do all the time. Okay, so not only is he known for Dracula, but he was also in other horror films from the time, like The Black Cat in 1934, The Wolf Man, and Murders on the Rue Morgue, among many others. But he was not born Bela Lugosi. He was born Blasco Bela Ferenc Dezo on October 20th, 1882, in Lagos, Hungary, now known as Lagos, Romania.
A Libra.
So, Lugosi's family was strictly middle class. His mother, whose name was Paula Devaniak, was a Serbian-born person living in Hungary. And his father was Hungarian. His name was Istvan Blasko. He was a baker turned banker. Okay. His father left baking in 1883 to set up a small bank in the town of Lagos. Istvan was a very conventional man. He had high hopes that his son would follow in his footsteps, but sadly for his father, Lugosi struggled with school. And on one occasion, when asked what he wanted to pursue in the future, he answered, "A highway bandit." In an article called Memories of a Madman, written by a woman named Gladys Hall in 1941, Lugosi describes his relationship with his father in these words, quote, "I had a very severe father, a man who never punished me physically, but something in his way of looking at me, and I would get stiff, a magnetism. I had such respect for him. He was the president of the bank, the leading citizen of Lagos. I chilled with fear. It was he who gave me, I know, my knowledge that is not the physical force which inspires the fear that makes men sick of soul, so much that which comes from the eyes, some subtle emanation from the personality, as a gas that takes the strength from men's limbs."
Well, people really talked differently back then.
They really talked differently back then. And also, I feel like this quote is interesting because it speaks to his performance, which later happened in Dracula, and why it's so famous. So the next part of Lugosi's history isn't too clear. It's widely accepted that Lugosi was like a serial exaggerator throughout his life. So on many occasions, there's all these different stories about him that people kind of have to sift through. Like, was he lying? Was he exaggerating? Like, what's actually going on here? But what is clear is that by the age of 12, he had dropped out of school and he had begun working for a living. It's said that Lugosi's father died when he was 12, which threw the family into financial turmoil. And Lugosi later told reporters that he had no choice but to leave home and find a job, walking 300 miles to an industrial center where he worked as a miner. Like mining, not like a miner, because he was a miner.
He also was a miner.
You know, O and E, both of those spellings. Whatever the impetus was that caused him to like leave home and to choose like a different like this like wage career, it seems that he basically worked wage jobs until he was 18 years old. And at this point, his sister Vilma persuaded her husband to get Lugosi a place in a traveling theater group, and Lugosi's acting career began. He always dreamed of being an actor. Mm-hmm. His European acting career began somewhere in 1901 or 1902. He mostly acted in provincial theaters at the time, playing small roles in plays and operettas. He went on to play a few parts in Shakespearean plays, and then in 1911 he moved to Budapest, where he had a dozen roles or so in the National Theatre of Hungary between 1913 and 1919. Lugosi would later claim that he became the leading actor of Hungary's Royal National Theatre, though most of his roles were actually small or only supporting roles. And then World War I hit, and Lugosi enlisted. He was an infantryman in the Austro-Hungarian army from 1914 to 1916. He rose to the rank of lieutenant. He was even awarded the Wound Medal for wounds he received when he was on the Russian front. And then his first ever film appearance happened after the war. It was in 1917. It was a film called The Colonel, directed by Michael Curtis. And you might not know the name Michael Curtis, but you have probably seen or heard of his films. Michael Curtis went on to be one of the most famous directors in Hollywood. He directed things like The Adventures of Robin Hood, Casablanca, Mildred Pierce, and one of my absolute Christmas favorites, White Christmas.
Oh, God. Don't get her started.
I love that one. It's so good. Back to Lugosi. So he was acting after World War I. He made 12 films in Hungary between 1917 and 1918. That's crazy. But the political atmosphere in Hungary at the time, like post-World War I, was not stable. The Hungarian Soviet Republic collapsed in 1919, basically leaving trade unions and leftists vulnerable. And Lugosi was no longer able to act because he had participated in like a specific union in his youth, and they were targeting those actors, and so he had to flee Hungary. And he traveled to Vienna, and then he ended up in Berlin, where he continued acting.
He never stopped.
Can you imagine? I can't imagine wanting to act this badly. I mean, I don't know. I'm always amazed by people's stories of like resilience. And I'm like, if I was put in a situation like this, would I be that strong?
I'd be like, just take me.
I don't know. I know now that I don't know if I'm that strong. Back then, maybe it would be different. Anyway, so it was during the time in Berlin that he changed his name from Blasco Bela Ferenc Dezo to just Bela Lugosi. The last name was in honor of his birthplace, Lagos. And he acted in a number of well-received films like On the Bank of Paradise and Caravan of Death. But he eventually left Europe altogether in 1920 and emigrated to the United States. Okay, so now we're hitting the States, baby.
Hollywood.
He actually went from Germany to New Orleans and then to New York City.
Okay, no Hollywood then.
No Hollywood, not yet.
The Big Easy.
Yeah.
And the Big Apple.
The Big Easy and the Big Apple, exactly. He was a big guy. He was actually like 6'5" or something. It's just a big
I feel like people
man.
weren't that tall back then.
No, they weren't. He was a big guy. Okay, so Bela is in New York City. He worked as a laborer initially, just like odd jobs. And then he found the Hungarian immigrant population in New York City, and he started acting again. He formed a small theater group with other Hungarian expats, and they toured cities, and they performed mostly to immigrants. He finally got his big break in 1922 when he got his first role in a Broadway show called The Red Poppy. What I thought was interesting about this is he wasn't very fluent in English. He didn't know much English at all. So he learned all of the lines phonetically. So he was speaking the lines, but he had no idea what he was saying. I thought that was really cool.
That's amazing.
I could never. Bravo to him. And then his first American film role was in 1923, and it was called The Silent Command. But then everything changed in 1927 when he was approached to star in the Broadway production of Dracula. Okay.
Oh, I didn't realize it was a Broadway play first. Was it a musical or a drama?
It should have been a musical. It was probably just a drama, though.
Ugh.
I know. Boring. I need like some like really great ballads, you know? Like kind of like Phantom. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah, I was thinking. Similar vibe.
Similar vibes. We'll workshop. Okay, so 1927, approached to be in Dracula on Broadway. The production was a massive success. It ran for 261 performances, and then it went on tour throughout the U.S. between 1928 and 1929. Lugosi played Dracula throughout the entire thing. They did the West Coast tour, and he decided, I love it over here, and he decided to stay in California instead of moving back to the East Coast. And his performance as Dracula in the play piqued the interest of a bunch of studios in Hollywood, specifically Fox Studios, and Fox casted him in his first Hollywood film in 1929, and what was released in 1929, it was called The Veiled Woman. Sadly, after this film came out, he kind of could only get roles here and there, odd roles here and there. He was playing a sheik in this film and a different type of foreigner in this film because he had the accent, and he couldn't really get the main leads.
Yeah.
He tried convincing Universal Pictures to make an adaptation of Dracula, but once the film was in motion, Lugosi was not the first pick to play the role. So, director Todd Browning had his eyes on a different monster man, the famous Lon Chaney. Sadly, Lon Chaney passed away in August of 1930 and was unable to play the role. So Todd Browning finally was like, fine, Lugosi can have the role. If you're not familiar with who Lon Chaney is, he was an American stage and film actor and a makeup artist. He was a director, a screenwriter, and this is from Wikipedia directly. He is regarded as one of the most versatile and powerful actors of cinema, renowned for his characterizations of tortured, often grotesque and afflicted characters, and his groundbreaking artistry with makeup. Chaney was known for his starring roles in the silent horror films, The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1923 and The Phantom of the Opera in 1925. His ability to transform himself using makeup techniques he developed earned him the nickname the Man of a Thousand Faces. You should look up Lon Chaney after this because the picture, like his Phantom of the Opera, is like that old 1925 like black and white silent film version of Phantom of the Opera. It's like really scary. And to think like if you look at what his face actually looks like and then you look at the characters that he created for like 1925, you're like, holy crap, this man was really talented.
Yeah. Wild.
Yes. So Todd Browning wanted him, couldn't get him because he died. And so he's like, fine, we'll do Lugosi. One of the other main reasons they ended up picking Lugosi is because Lugosi decided to accept a pay rate of only $500 a week, which amounted to a total of $3,500 total for his entire participation in the film. So it's pretty inexpensive.
Is that with the inflation? What would that be? What's
No.
like the equivalent?
That's a good question. I'm not sure what the equivalent would be. I didn't do that math.
Someone do it for us. Let us know.
Someone quick. But yeah, so they could get him on the cheap. So they're like, fine, we'll give it to him. The filming began in September 1930. They had a 36-day shoot schedule and a budget of $355,000. David Manners, who played John Harker in the film, and John Harker is the man
Vampire Slayer.
That's Van Helsing. John Harker is the one that like flies or like travels to Transylvania to like help Dracula move to England.
Oh, okay.
So David Manners plays John Harker, and this is what he said of Lugosi, quote, "I can still see Lugosi parading up and down the stage, posing in front of a full-length mirror, throwing his cape over his shoulder and shouting, 'I am Dracula.' He was mysterious and never really said anything to the other members of the cast, except good morning when he arrived and good night when he left. He was polite, but always distant." Manners went on to say, quote, "I never thought he was acting, but being the odd man that he was," end quote. So it's kind of like he had this aura about him.
Maybe he was method acting.
Method acting before they even knew what it was.
Like Daniel Day-Lewis style.
Exactly. And then Helen Chandler, who played Mina, and Mina in Dracula is the woman that Dracula transfixes. He's like feeding off of her and she becomes like this dead thing that's just like walking in the night. And eventually she dies. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read or watched any Dracula. So she was playing Mina. And she was actually known to laugh at Lugosi when he performed his mirror ritual. Because he would do that every day. Like, it wasn't part of filming. It was like his thing to get in character. And she would laugh at him. And I'm like, F you, Mina. She also had disdain for acting in the film overall. She said, quote, "It would be an awful fate, for instance, to go around being a pale little girl in a trance with her arms outstretched as in Dracula all the rest of my screen career," end quote. Sadly, this is like her most famous film. So that is what she's known for. And also, sadly for Bela Lugosi, most people only know him as playing Dracula. So, the film was reportedly a gamble for Universal because no one was sure if American audiences would buy into this kind of horror film or if they could handle this kind of thriller. This kind of film had no comic relief or like trick ending that a lot of horror films had during the time. So, all of that said, however, it was a huge success at the box office. News reports, they said that audience members were actually fainting in the middle of screenings, so they were so scared.
People were so dramatic back in the day.
I know, but if you think about like
I guess if they had never seen or
exactly
limited exposure to movies.
Right, like the first films were like less than 50 years old. And now they're seeing something like Dracula on the screen for the first time. Like, that must be horrifying.
Try showing the Human Centipede to people in like 1920.
I was gonna say Saw, like with the same thing, or like Hostel, you know, like
they would actually die.
They would Yeah, they would poop their pants. They'd be like so shocked. That was not a reference to the human centipede, but take it however you will. Okay, anyway, so people are fainting in the theaters. And the film actually went on to make the most money out of all of the releases that Universal put out that year. And of Lugosi's performance, Variety wrote, quote, "It is difficult to think of anybody who could quite match the performance in the vampire part of Bela Lugosi, even to the faint flavor of foreign speech that fits so neatly." End quote. Part of the success of the film was partly due to good marketing. When it was clear that the film was going to do well at the box office, Universal concocted a backstory for Lugosi, which I hate. So no longer was he the child of this middle-class family from Hungary, but now he was a count with a castle in the mountains of Transylvania. I kid you not.
So they tried to make people think he was an actual vampire?
Yeah.
That's dumb.
Yes. And Lugosi was quoted as saying, quote, "Never has a role so influenced and dominated an actor's life as has the role of Dracula. He has at times infused me with prosperity, and at other times he has drained me of everything. It is a living, but it's also a curse. It's Dracula's curse."
Dracula's curse.
Yes. But honestly, the reason the 1931 Dracula has lived on is because of Lugosi's performance.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Bela Lugosi website. It is run by Lugosi's son, whose name is Bela Lugosi Jr., and on the website, the son writes, quote, "My father's characterization was perfected to the point that, much to the chagrin of Universal Studios makeup legend Jack Pierce, he did his own makeup for the film version. For years thereafter, he made personal appearances and played the part on stage. He was billed as Dracula himself and Bela Dracula Lugosi. If ever an actor's fate was to come full circle, it was Dad's. His unforgettable performance as Dracula on stage and later in the film was so masterful that it set the standard for all interpretations to come. Spoken in his unforgettable voice and accent, Dad's lines from the film have become some of the most well-known and imitated in movie history. Quote, 'I am Dracula, I bid you welcome.' Or, quote, 'Listen to them, children of the night, what music they make.' That is like one of my favorite lines from the film.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, 'This is very old wine, I hope you will like it.' And, most memorably, 'I never drink wine.'" That's like one of his most famous. But I wasn't going to read it in his accent, but, he does the vine
Mm-hmm.
and like, "Will you sit down?" Like he does that kind of accent.
Yeah.
Life after Dracula. So thanks to Dracula and Frankenstein, which Universal released that same year, but it was played by another famous horror actor, Boris Karloff, Universal was established as the top producer of horror films, and Lugosi became known as one of the kings of the genre. So Lon Chaney, Bela Lugosi, and Boris Karloff are like the three, like the trifecta of like monster character actors from that time period.
Mm-hmm.
Lugosi went on to act in films such as Murders in the Rue Morgue in 1932, The Black Cat in 1934, The Raven in 1935, Son of Frankenstein 1939, Body Snatcher in 1945, and he also made an appearance. He reprised his role as Dracula in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1948. Unfortunately for Lugosi, because he accepted such a low rate for Dracula, he became known as an actor that studios could get for cheap. It was reported that he was always paid less than his contemporary Boris Karloff, even though they were performing comparable roles. And oftentimes, Bela Lugosi had the lead role, and Boris Karloff was the supporting, but Boris Karloff was always paid more.
Rude.
Do with that what you will. And continuing life after Dracula, it wasn't as prosperous as Lugosi would have liked or deserved. His work dropped off significantly, and when he was working, it was reprising past monster work with very little pay. He was so poor by the time his only child was born in 1938 that he had to take a loan out to pay for the hospital fees. He spent years dealing with the emotional and physical wounds of World War I, plus the pressure of his career in Hollywood or lack thereof. By 1955, he was addicted to narcotics rather seriously, to the point where he voluntarily committed himself to a hospital in California in hopes to overcome his addiction to methadone and morphine. He really wanted to make a comeback, and he really wanted to get out of being typecast because he was typecast pretty seriously. He had grown so sick that he could no longer take care of himself, and he basically begged a judge to let him be committed to this hospital, and they did. He was released from rehab after about 3 months. And it was around this time that he began associating with director Ed Wood. Do you know who director Ed Wood is?
Mm-mm.
So the reason I know who Ed Wood is because there's a Tim Burton film called Ed Wood. And it is starring Johnny Depp as Ed Wood. And Ed Wood is known as, in Hollywood, one of the worst directors of all time.
Mhm.
Like, of all time. And so Ed Wood heard that Lugosi was like alive still and like kicking and like trying to find work. And Ed's like, I can't get anybody to act in my films. You want to be in my horror films? And Bella's like, okay. And so they collaborated together multiple times throughout the mid-50s on films called, that the grunge calls, quote, staggeringly shoddy efforts, end quote. These films were Glenn or Glenda, question mark, from 53, Bride of the Monster in 56, and Plan 9 from Outer Space, which was filmed in 56 but released in 59. And these films are all now considered cult classics. I would love to watch these with you.
Yeah, I'm down.
Bela Lugosi died sadly shortly after leaving rehab. On August 16th, 1956, he had a heart attack while napping in his LA apartment. His then wife, her name was Hope, discovered him upon returning home from work. He was 73 years old, and he is buried wearing one of his Dracula capes and in full costume in the Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. You can actually Google Bela Lugosi casket photo, and it comes up, and he's like
He's in full costume. I don't know how I feel about that.
He's in full costume.
I hope that was his choice.
It was not his choice. His wife and son decided to do. Well, his ex-wife and son decided to do it.
Well, not ex-wife. His widower.
Yes. No.
Oh.
Ex-wife. So that brings me to I want to talk about his marriages because I just think it's so interesting. Like, I didn't have anywhere else to put them in the topic, but I still want to talk about them. So, he was married 5 times.
Okay.
The first time was in 1917. He married a woman named Ilona Schmicks. They ended in divorce in 1920 because he had to flee Hungary and Ilona wanted to stay with her family. Makes sense. He married again, number 2, in 1921, another woman named Ilona von Montag, and they divorced in 1924. And then he married again in 1929, a woman named Beatrice Weeks, who was a wealthy San Francisco widower. She divorced him 4 months later, accusing Lugosi of having an affair with an actress named Clara Bow. In 1931, he married for a 4th time. He married a woman named Lillian Arch, who was 22 years younger than him. And they had their son together in 1938. But they divorced in 1953 because Lugosi was jealous of her taking a full-time job with an actor named Brian Dunleavy. And then eventually, Lillian married Brian Dunleavy anyway. So, was Bella right? They were actually married for a pretty long time, 1931 to 1953.
Yeah.
He only died a couple years after that. And then his 5th marriage was in 1955. He married Hope Lininger, who was 37 years younger than him. Oh. Hope would write him passionate and supportive letters as he recovered in rehab. And it was Hope who found him when he died. And she actually never remarried after his death.
And she was the one who decided to put him in a...
It was Lillian, the one who left.
The one that his son's mom.
Correct. Exactly. So Lillian and Bela Lugosi Jr. decided to put him in the cape and the makeup. And they said, he didn't ask us to do it, but we thought he would want it.
I mean, well, I guess they would know better then.
They would know. I'm going to end on a quote from Bela Lugosi's son. Quote, Bela Lugosi is Dracula. My father, Bela Lugosi, created his signature portrayal of the sophisticated count on the Broadway stage, which he later brought to Universal Studios in its classic 1931 horror film Dracula. He thus played a pivotal role in the modern mythology and rich legend of my favorite monster, Dracula, the popularity of which continues today.
Very nice.
And that's Bella. Have you ever seen the 1931 Dracula?
I don't think so. I haven't seen a lot of like older horror movies.
We should watch them. They're so good. It's
Are
also
they
interesting.
scary?
They're not scary, but if you try and watch it from a lens of like, these are films that are just coming out of the silent film era. So like the technological advances, like the sound effects and the special effect that they were using, and like the makeup, like none of this had been done before. So it's kind of like revolutionary, some of the stuff that they were doing. It's pretty cool.
I'm down. Too bad we aren't going to see each other for the rest of October, but
we can celebrate the Harvest Festival in November. See you then.
Right. That works.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I'm down. Sounds very cool.
Yes.
My topic is a pivot, kind of.
Ooh.
Stories, but very different stories. So it is from the Monday, October 11th puzzle by Ben Paul, and it is 62 across. Material for Cinderella slipper.
Glass. Are we talking about Cinderella?
Yes.
Cinderella was my favorite story as a kid. Like, my favorite Disney princess, so.
Well, we'll see if it still is after this episode.
I mean, I love Cinderella, so. I like all of Cinderellas, so.
I never watched Cinderella as a kid. It was never one of the movies that was like on our rotation. I don't even think I've seen the like entire. I must have at some point, but I mean, I know it obviously.
I just love like I think what appealed to me was the fact that someone in like a fraught situation could like get out. And that is like a lot of information, but I feel like that's why I liked it so much.
Well, we will talk about that and how exactly she gets out and what.
Ooh.
It'll get into nitty-gritty. Okay.
Let's do it.
So Cinderella, made famous by the Disney's animated film in 1950, but it goes back way further than that. And I'm not even talking about Brothers Grimm. way further. So this is essentially a story of a young woman rising into a higher social class through marriage. And it's been around for more than 2,000 years. So a lot of this information is from an article on NPR.com called A Girl, a Shoe, a Prince, The Endlessly Evolving Cinderella by Linda Holmes. So the first recorded Cinderella story, and I'm just saying a Cinderella story, even though in a lot of these stories, Cinderella is not her name, goes back to 6th century BCE in Greece. So this story goes, a Greek courtesan named Rhodopis has one of her shoes stolen by an eagle who flies it all the way across the Mediterranean and drops it in the lap of an Egyptian king. So the king sees the shoe and thinks it's a sign from heaven, and, to be fair, it did fall out of the sky into his lap. So he goes on a quest to find the owner of the shoe. When he finds Rhodopis, he marries her, and she leaves her lowly life behind to become a queen.
Ooh.
So we already got the shoe motif. That's been,
wow, yeah,
cemented a long time ago. There's a 9th century Chinese fairy tale about Ye Xian, which tells the story of a young girl named Ye Xian, who, after her dad died, had to work for her evil stepmom and live with her evil stepsister. So again, this is it's so interesting how many things are exactly the same.
Yeah.
This story is very complicated. It's a very truncated version of it. But basically, she finds a magical fish that was sent by her dead mom. After a series of events, she was able to use the fish's bones to wish for a new outfit to wear to the annual New Year's festival, including gold shoes made out of fish scales. So at the festival, she forgets one of her shoes, and it is found by a peasant. It's passed around until it reaches the hand of a king who is fascinated by how small the shoe is. He goes around town until the shoe finally fits on Ye Xian, and he invites her to become queen. Meanwhile, her stepmom and sister get into a violent fight, and their house caves in, and they both die. The end.
That is Cinderella. That's Cinderella.
Yeah. Marion Rolfe Cox wrote a story in 1893 where the Cinderella character is born in a gourd. I think this is where the pumpkin thing comes from. So basically, her mom delivers a gourd, and the baby's inside of it, but the mom doesn't know. So the mom just leaves the gourd in the forest. And it's found by a prince who takes it home. Cinderella eventually comes out of the gourd as a full person. The details are kind of hazy on how this happens, but she basically becomes a servant for the prince, who is now a king, who found her. Then he has a ball, and she disguises herself as a rich person to go to the ball. The prince king falls in love with her for the night, gives her all these gifts. The next day, she's back to being a servant. She's serving him breakfast. She puts the gifts in the breakfast. He finds a necklace and is like, oh my gosh, you're the girl that I fell in love with last night. Let's get married and you can become a queen and you're not a servant anymore. So it's the same theme of it's a poor person, but then they pretend to be rich, and that's when the prince falls in love with them, and then they go back to being poor, and then the prince loves them despite being poor. But it's always they have to kind of appear to be rich first.
Yep.
By the way, there's hundreds of Cinderella stories.
I believe it's a very universal kind of idea, and I think especially when there was a much wider wealth gap, and when like this idea of like middle class didn't exactly exist when you were either poor or royal, so like I can imagine like how people must have yearned for anything to change their circumstances, anything at all. And like, yeah, so it's a very like, what's the word, universal idea.
You got to have small feet. And it was also like the stepmom thing was huge, like that type of family, because a lot of women were dying in childbirth. So a lot of people had stepmoms. Why they were always evil, I don't know.
Do they just hate women?
Because, people hate women, basically. So in a Vietnamese story called Ca Jong and Haloek, Ca Jong is the Cinderella character, and she tricks her evil stepmother into eating the flesh of her own daughter. So the evil stepsister boiled herself alive in an effort to like be as pretty as Ca Jong, and then she tricks the mom into eating her own daughter. So Disney left that part out.
Boring.
The Italian story from 1634 by Giambattista Basile translates to The Cat Cinderella in English because Cinderella is as clever as a cat. She murders her first wicked stepmom and repeatedly pokes her father with a pin until he agrees to marry her governess next. But the governess also ends up being an evil stepmom. At the end, Cinderella is able to outwit her stepsisters and make it to the ball, yada, yada, yada. We know how it goes. But the story that most closely inspired the Disney tale we know today was written by a French writer, Charles Perrault, I don't know, don't speak French, called Cendrillon. Mm-hmm. This story is the one that introduces the glass slipper, the pumpkin, and the fairy godmother. Mm-hmm. The Brothers Grimm story, I feel like everyone thinks all Disney stories were originally Brothers Grimm stories, but that story didn't come out until like 100 years later. It was a little darker. Cinderella's wishes come not from a fairy godmother, but from a tree that's growing on her mother's grave. And her father wasn't dead, just oblivious to Cinderella's suffering. The slippers are gold and not glass, and one of the stepsisters cuts off her toes to make the shoe fit. Mm-hmm. Cinderella ends up marrying the prince. Her stepsisters are her bridesmaids. However, during the wedding ceremony, their eyes get plucked out by doves. So that's that.
Is this the French version?
That's the Brothers Grimm version, so it's German.
Okay. Yes. So that's what I remember the Brothers Grimm version being. And I believe the reason why the Disney version is set in France and it's got like the French themes is because the original like inspiration is the French story.
Yeah. So the Disney cartoon came out in 1950. In 1957, CBS aired a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical starring Julie Andrews, and this was like her first big role. Mary Poppins would come out like 7 years later. If you want to know more about that, we talk all about it in our Sound of Music podcast, Do Re Mi. We talk about Julie Andrews and how she basically rose to fame.
Have you seen that version of Cinderella?
I haven't, no.
It's so good because it's Rodgers and Hammerstein, which is my favorite version of Cinderella of all time. And then Julie Andrews, like, could you ask for anything better? Could you ask for anything better? And it's like one of those live performances where they shot it live, and it's like on one of like a soundstage kind of vibe. Anyway, I saw it like on CBS like when I was in high school, and they just like put it on as a rerun. Anyway, it's amazing.
Change your life.
Watch it. It's so good. So good.
Well, then in 1997, Brandy and Whitney Houston starred in the made-for-TV adaptation, and that is like what I watched that a lot. That was always on TV when I was younger, and it's good.
That is my favorite Cinderella adaptation, hands down, of all time. Like the Brandy, Whitney Houston version. It is so good, and the stepsisters are so funny. The interracial prince family, the Asian son, the black mom, white dad. It was just,
and no explanation needed. It's just everyone just accepts it.
It was just
fine. The families
good.
that look like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the music is so good.
It's so
impossible.
It's impossible for a strange yellow pumpkin to become a golden carriage. Anyway, am I gonna watch that tonight? Who knows?
Maybe. Okay, and then I remember my sister really liking this movie, 1998 Ever After, starring Drew Barrymore.
Oh yeah,
I don't
remember that one that much.
It was like a more feminist take on the story, feminist for 1998. The Cinderella character was like more admired for her intelligence and independence. Of course, she was also played by Drew Barrymore, so she was also attractive. Cinderella has to be attractive because that means she's good. And then in 2004, A Cinderella Story, starring Hilary Duff, had an even more modern take. She left her cell phone instead of a glass slipper.
Yep.
Chad Michael Murray couldn't recognize her, even though she literally had like a tiny masquerade mask around her eyes, and he ate at the diner she worked at like every day.
Yep.
In 2015, Disney made a live action version of the cartoon. They did the same thing with Beauty and the Beast. They did modernize it a little bit. So Cinderella met the prince before the ball and was interested in him then. It was more like a rom-com meet cute. So basically she liked him without knowing he was a prince. Apparently that makes things better. You may think this is the end, but we will never know peace because in 2021, they remade it with Camila Cabello.
They did. I haven't watched that one.
I haven't seen it, but I kind of want to watch it, ironically. Like,
I'd watch it with you.
Watch it. Yeah.
I'd watch it with you.
Got bad reviews. I don't know.
It looks... TikTok was pushing it to me hard with their advertisements, and I was just like, this is a joke, right? Like, this isn't real, is it? And it's very real.
Well, they kind of did a Moulin Rouge type thing where they took, like, current songs. I guess the Moulin Rouge, whatever. Okay. They took, like, other songs, outside songs, and then put them into the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
When they could have done, like, the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical.
They could have. They should have.
Another thing was that in this version, Cinderella is a, quote, girl boss. She's a dressmaker. She's like a businesswoman. And she doesn't want to be a princess because she's worried it'll interfere with her business. So that's like that Hallmark movie trope of, leaving big jug behind to find love. I don't know. I'm assuming at the end she gets both, but we'll see. So
right. Okay.
Lots to unpack here. I feel like the story of Cinderella harms women. But first, let's talk about the prince, because he is not unscathed either. The prince is a trophy. He's an object. In most stories, he could be replaced with a burrito, and the plot wouldn't change. Some adaptations, like Into the Woods, try to give him more of a backstory, more depth.
I love Into the Woods.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's Prince Charming. He's basically like, a beige wall.
Yes.
But another common theme in Cinderella is the treachery of women.
Yeah.
So women want to see each other fail. Stepmoms and stepsisters are evil. Bad women are often ugly. If you're what men consider to be pretty and nice, then you deserve good things. You were fine with your dad, but then he died, left you with your stepmom. Now you need to marry a prince to get out of your situation. Proximity to men, successful men, is what saves you in life. Marriage is the goal. It's the happily ever after effect.
It does not pass the Bechdel test, that's for damn sure.
No. So a lot of this other information is from an article on Vox.com called The Slippery Genius of the Cinderella Story by Constance Grade. So a big part of the Cinderella story is that she is nice. That's what separates her, like, from her, evil stepmom and stepsisters. She's just, like, so sweet and kind. But it hasn't always been that way. In earlier adaptations, she is cunning, sly, and, like, a trickster. I mean, some of the stories, she was, like, making her stepmom eat her stepsister, just poking her dad with a pin. But that voice was slowly lost over time. So the Grimm brothers actually rewrote the Cinderella story many different times, and Ruth Boddingheimer, a folklorist, which is an amazing job, at Stony Brook University at SUNY, wrote a book in 1997 called Grimm's Bad Girls and Bold Boys, and she looked into this. She tracked the speech across different iterations, looking at which characters get to speak out loud and have, like, direct speech, and which characters have their sentences summarized, which is called indirect speech. And she found a pattern. Direct speech, like over the iterations over the years, direct speech was transferred from women to men, but also from good women to bad women. So in the Grimm's 1812 version of the story, Cinderella has 12 lines of direct speech. Her stepmother and the prince have 4. But by 1857, Cinderella is down to 6 lines of direct speech. In 1812, she protests her poor treatment and lies to her stepmother. In 1864, she obeys her stepmother and stays silent. In 1864, her stepmother has 12 lines of direct speech and the prince has 11. This is a quote from Boddingheimer. Quote, good women illustrate their virtue through their silence and passivity. Bad women show their badness by talking, which is unwomanly and hence wicked. Men who are strong and active should speak at will.
Yes, all of this is very valid.
Yes, and so now I'm going to talk a little bit into Ever After and the wedding industrial complex. Which,
yes, please.
If you've ever gotten me in a room alone, give me a glass of wine. We will go in depth into this. I'm going to try.
What are you doing tonight? Let's get the wine.
I'm going to try to hold back. But the wedding industrial complex, I think the Ever After effect, which isn't a lot of movies, but especially in Cinderella, deals with this. Marriage, sometimes, like even just the wedding itself, is peddled to women as being the ultimate achievement in life. That's what gets you out of your situation. That's what saves Cinderella from her, having to be a servant.
It's all going to be okay after you get married.
Exactly.
It's the most important day of your life.
This is changing. Like, a lot of kids' movies now do not even have romantic storylines at all. But, you know, our childhood certainly did. Like, who knows how we've been affected.
I know.
But it's not just Cinderella. Of course, there's other things. But this story has been around for centuries, since like the 2000s. Like, people have been talking about how men need to save women. Is there any escaping this? Is there any escaping this, like, marriage that gets stuck, you know, in our head as the ultimate goal? Maybe it is true. Marriage will make a woman's life better. I'm sure it did at some point. Like, you could, you know, you couldn't even get a credit card unless you were married up until a couple decades ago. But let's look at some current statistics. Studies have shown that married people are happier than unmarried people. But this doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could just mean people who are happier tend to get married. They have like the emotional capacity, the ability, the money to get married. So
right.
Stats do show.
And like, how do you even like
exactly? How do you measure
even
happiness?
Like gauge what happiness is? You know, like anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. That's like kind of the same thing with all these stats. Like, nothing is, you know, you can't do like a truly controlled experiment on this. But statistics do show that men benefit more from marriage. They experience increases in health, wealth, and happiness, while married women do not have any benefits over unmarried women. And as much as marriage is supposed to be a woman's highest goal, you know, that's why you have the bridal shower and where all the women in your life come together and celebrate
don't
their
even get
married.
Me started, Grace. I wasn't expecting to get started tonight.
2/3 of divorces are initiated by women. That's 69% people. Oh, by the way, all these statistics are for straight marriages. So God bless to you all.
Good luck.
Be me. Okay, so is this because women feel oppressed in marriage? Or is it because women have higher expectations of marriage, happily ever after, and then they're let down?
Or is it both? Is it a little bit of both?
Well, interestingly, so 69% of divorces are initiated by women. But this, like, ratio only exists in marriage. It does not exist in unmarried breakups. Like, unmarried couple breakups. It's not like that. It's like just marriage for some reason. So
that is not surprising to me at all.
Yeah, just something to think about out there. Let's tie it back to Cinderella. Okay, so the institution of marriage has evolved over time, obviously, and women's existence outside of romantic relationships has also evolved over time. You know, we have more stories than just romance stories. But we can look at these different Cinderella adaptations as a snapshot of current ideas of womanhood and marriage. So I'm going to end with a quote from that Vox article. Quote, "One of the things that make Perrault's Cinderella story an unlikely classic is that stripped to its basics, there's barely enough of it to sustain more than a paragraph. Sad girl gets magic dress, goes to dance, loses shoe, is found. The read-thin story is why usually things are added. All the things that tell you what kind of Cinderella this is and whom it's made for. Cinderella becomes a kind of cultural tofu that takes on the flavor of whatever you're mixing it with." So, what is the next iteration of Cinderella going to be? I mean, maybe we need to watch this one that just came out with Camila Cabello and see.
But like, to me, it's so very clearly tone deaf because Girl Boss is so out.
I know it is.
It's so out.
But I feel like it's not fully out. Like, people are starting to realize that it's like, oh yeah, to be like a successful woman, you don't measure yourself by the same barometers we used to measure successful men.
Correct. And also, like, just because you're a girl boss and you're quote unquote successful, like, in order to be successful, like, you are standing on the backs of people who are quote unquote less successful than you are. And is that actually girl bossing it? Is that equality? You know, when you are enacting the same oppression that a man would do in the same position. Anyway, girl boss is problematic.
This is just like a starting point for maybe conversations that people want to have. But that's that in the Cinderella. And
for sure. And Cinderella has always been my favorite fairy tale. And I have always found that the reason that I gravitate towards Cinderella is because it's like a girl escapes like it's seemingly impossible circumstances. That is why I find myself attracted to the story. Thinking about like the Disney version, like you said, like the prince is just an object. He's like a thing. the prince is a nothing element of the story for me. It's more about Cinderella's ability to like escape. But like all of that said, I can look at this as like an almost 30-year-old woman and like kind of dissect the various Cinderellas. But what kind of impression did these stories leave on me as a young girl? And how much of this am I unlearning now as a woman?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just think like all the princess stories, for some reason, I was never into I wonder why. I was never that into the princess stories. But like I was watching more like the movies for boys, in quotes, like Lion King is one that we watched a lot. Peter Pan. Didn't necessarily have that, but you think of, even like, what's the message in Little Mermaid? Give up everything for some guy you don't know? Hello? That's what Twilight is.
Yeah.
But yeah, who knows? Who knows what damage it's done to us?
It's definitely done damage. We're all unlearning it. I think, though, in particular, the thing that stands out to me the most now looking back is not necessarily like the gender roles of like, to be a good woman, you have to be quiet and meek and like listen to men. It's like the anti-woman sentiment in all of these stories. The fact that like the stepmom is evil, the stepsisters are evil. Not only are they evil and like bad people, they're ugly. And like especially in like live action adaptations, oftentimes these stepsisters were casted in by fat women. And it's like, so it's the demonizing of fat people as well, which is like a different brand of anti-woman. And it's just like,
well, and Ever After, it's interesting. There's two stepsisters, and one of them is like not actually evil, and she is a fat woman. But yeah, and then Hilary Duff one, it's like the stepsisters they're just like dorky and ugly, but then the evil girls are the pretty popular girls at school,
right?
And then of course Cinderella's Hilary Duff. So it's just like you're only worthy if you're pretty, and if you're pretty means you're nice, and being nice is like the best thing you can be. I think there's a difference between being nice and kind, but who knows? Right.
Well, it's also like this is all metered by men. Like the men are deciding this, not the women aren't deciding their worth. It's the men that are deciding the worth of the women. Like Hilary Duff is pretty and nice and kind, but it's the fact that Chad Michael Murray buys into that. That like is the validating element. Like there's no like self-assurance in that, it's not like Hilary Duff like living and believing and, I'm great and I don't need anything. It's the fact that Chad Michael Murray buys into this image that validates her worthiness. Anyway, we could talk about this for a very long time.
But I do think things are changing. I mean, I've watched a lot of these movies now with my niece and nephew, and it's like totally different storylines. It's crazy like what type of stuff was allowed.
We were talking about this the other day when we were walking somewhere about how like children's shows and movies growing up, there's just so much romance just baked into this kind of content. And it's like, why are we allowing like 7 and 8-year-olds to be romantically involved like on TV and then showing it to other 7 and 8-year-olds and 10 and 11-year-olds? It's just very strange. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack here.
We've done it all this episode. I feel like we've gone up and down. We've gone to the depths of Dracula's cave.
We've put everything out on the table, and it's up for you to decide what you're going to eat, We birthed a gourd for you. That is insane. She just like
strange.
birthed this gourd. She was like, all right, bye. And she like leaves it. Imagine birthing a gourd, Grace. No,
I'd probably, I would take it with me.
I would crack it open. What's in there?
I would take it to the doctor and be like, can you x-ray this thing?
Can you figure this out, please?
Came at me. All right.
Well, this has been wild.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys have a great 2 weeks.
We'll miss you. We really, really will. I hope this topic, this just kind of sates your curiosity.
It'll give you plenty to think about. Okay?
Think.
We will still be on social media, so if you want, you can talk to us on Twitter at The Good Eve Girls.
Or Instagram at The Good Evening Girls.
Or TikTok at The Good Eve Girls.
Come on by.
And
most importantly, listeners, please make sure to keep curious.
Keep curious. You heard it here first. Neptune agrees. We will see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.